Are you comfortable giving people tough feedback? If you're like most people, you'd rather do almost anything than have to potentially hurt someone's feelings, say the wrong thing, or maybe start a confrontation by trying to have a difficult conversation. The reason these types of conversations are so difficult is that we usually don't have a lot of experience trying to talk to people about challenging topics. Further, we've been told that it is completely acceptable to tell people little white lies rather than potentially hurt their feelings. With people close to us, we usually feel like we can just put up with whatever the downside of the behavior from the other person is. This feels much easier than confronting someone. And for relationships, where we're the authority figure, either someone that reports to us at work or for our kids, we usually don't have a good model for handling the situation. So we fail by giving people much too subtle a message or being too authoritarian and missing a chance to deliver feedback in a constructive way. I like to tell people there are 3 simple rules for giving literally anyone feedback comfortably. Step 1, figure out what the real problem is that you need to address. Step 2, decide a good approach to explain the problem to them. And step 3, build a time machine, go back in time, and build a solid relationship with them. Hopefully you find that funnier than most people I've shared that with, but I really am trying to make an important point. I feel like you can tell someone that you're close to literally anything. It may require some thought and a gentle approach, but if they trust you and they trust that you're being fundamentally honest and sincere, they're actually very likely to listen without the reactions you would fear most. Solid relationships with people are built on a few core principles, but trust is probably the most important when you need to have a difficult conversation. Trust is what lets someone be vulnerable and hear what you're saying and hopefully not immediately become defensive. Trust is what allows them to believe you're not coming at them with a criticism simply for your own selfish reasons. You're going to tell them something about themselves that is not a compliment. They are likely going to have at least a bit of a negative reaction. But if they trust you, you can hopefully keep the negative emotions to a minimum. Building trust is, by itself, kind of a challenge. But this is where, if you don't have a time machine, instead you should begin day one with whoever you're interacting with to invest in a relationship of trust. There's lots of things that will help you do this, but understand there's absolutely nothing that can substitute for simply putting in the time. You'll need to spend time interacting with the person. They will need to see you follow through on things that you say to believe you mean what you say. But most importantly, time will need to pass for them to grow comfortable with you and become confident in giving you their trust. John C. Maxwell, in his excellent book, Becoming a Person of Influence, starts with a long section on integrity and why it is the cornerstone of influence. When I first read this book, I thought to myself, this is common sense. Of course you need integrity. But as you have probably discovered over time, not everyone understands this and lives up to it. And most people have been on a receiving end of too many people who've not been good people. This is, of course, why we don't trust. Your acts of integrity offer a bit of a shortcut to have people grow to trust you. They don't have to see you doing the right thing for them. They will see you doing the right thing for everyone, all the time. They will see that you live by a code that says, do everything ethically. They'll observe this, and it will help build their confidence that with everyone, including with them, you'll be doing your best to do what is right. I've heard a lot of people in the workplace repeat the counterintuitive collective wisdom that you don't want to get too close to the people that work for you because they will not respect your authority. This seems completely wrong to me. I believe that the people you are closest to are the people who you can most easily get to understand whatever you need to tell them. Don't believe me? Have you ever thought, I really don't want to get too close to my kids because they won't respect my authority? I would hope that you have not. And further, when you think about it, you'll probably never be even as close to your coworkers as you are to your kids. So I don't think your closeness to these people will be an issue. There are many books that give you tools for having a difficult conversation. They aren't bad, and they can really help give you a framework for what to say. But personally, I think your best friends are sincerity, forethought about what you're going to say, and being observant of the other person's response to see if they're getting your message or you're coming across too harshly. I cannot stress enough that you need to start delivering your message gently. The people you think are the toughest and can really take a tough message are sometimes the people most uncomfortable who are trying to project a strong exterior. Believe me, you can always turn up the volume on your message. What you can't do is take back something you said that pushed someone too far. Literally my first month managing, I was informed of a difficult message that I had to deliver. It was my first difficult conversation, and I would have hoped I would have started with something easy, like making sure someone got in on time. But I was told that someone on my team had been accused of sexually harassing someone in another department. As you can imagine, this is not the first conversation that I wanted to have. I did not have a solid relationship with my boss, so I didn't even think about asking her what to do. I was so early in my career, I didn't realize HR would likely have a framework for any kind of conversation I need to have, or tips for what to say. I didn't have a mentor or a peer that I felt comfortable asking advice from, and I felt this was a pretty important situation that I should provide feedback on quickly. So I just did what felt like the right thing. Luckily, my employee was someone I had spent a lot of time talking to and had developed a good rapport with. I made a lot of mistakes in my early days managing, but I think I had managed to avoid vices like trying to cultivate a distance from my team, or being aloof, or not being genuine. I had been myself and open with all of them, so I think I had earned some level of trust. I told him we needed to chat and suggested we take a walk. I told him about my day and asked him about his day. I told him managing was harder than I expected. Then I told him I had to give him a tough message, and I told him the message. His response was surprise, but he didn't pretend not to know what I was talking about. He took the feedback well, which I did not expect. We chatted, and I asked him to make sure he didn't talk to the woman again, and he agreed. My boss seemed a bit surprised when I reported that the situation was resolved so soon after she talked to me. I believe after years of experience, I could have done a better job with some of my technique in the conversation, but I've never strayed from these fundamentals when talking to others about difficult topics. Be open, be direct, be gentle, but don't avoid the topic. And most importantly, make sure you've gotten the person to trust you long before you have to do this. Technique is literally 5% of the conversation, in my opinion. In fact, trying to be crafty or skillful might make you seem insincere. So best to avoid technique altogether. Just be yourself. Some of my best difficult conversations with people have come when I had acknowledged their perspective and their feelings, even when it seemed to put my message at a disadvantage. Often as a manager, you're trying to get someone to buy into what an organization is trying to accomplish, even if what you're trying to accomplish is counter to what your employee wants. And often your employee has a really valid reason for disagreeing with what you're trying to tell them. Acknowledging this and still explaining why they need to change is, in my opinion, the only good way to handle it. It's honest, it's open, and it gives you an empathetic way to say that the employee is correct and the organization's needs have to come first. Companies make mistakes and do things that are completely wrong sometimes, but usually they have a very valid reason for their goals. Employees are exactly the same. Your job is to try to explain how both of these things can be true at the same time. Obviously, I'm not talking about your person that shows up late. That's a simple problem. The meaty problems are the ones where, for example, your person understands a situation that they're very close to, and as a result, they believe their solution is better than the decision that was made higher up the food chain. Usually, the disconnect occurs because they don't have the higher perspective, and they don't realize how their view of the situation is limited. This is where you can really build a bridge between the person and the organization by explaining why their idea is in fact quite good, but it's still not the right path for the company to take. Clearly, there are so many different categories of these difficult conversations, but they often have these same basic elements: a conflict over direction, a good idea that is missing some perspective, a person who doesn't feel heard, a larger vision that needs to be shared. This is where you can also make a clear analogy to the other difficult conversations you need to have in your life, with your partner, your kids, and sometimes other people close to you. I have found that most conflicts that are real and challenging happen not because the other person doesn't understand the vision. I think it usually happens because you haven't gotten the other person to trust you. When I was younger, I always wanted to understand how to change someone's mind, and I'm embarrassed to admit how old I was before I realized it's not their mind that needs to be changed at all. Difficult conversations are called difficult for a reason. They're fraught with the possibility that we will hurt someone's feelings, or make an enemy, or push them further away from our point of view. But when they work, They're one of the most rewarding things that will happen in your relationships. You'll walk away from the other person feeling a stronger bond to them. You'll both have grown in your relationship, and hopefully you will have resolved or gotten closer to resolving something that's been a strain. Remember that you may not be successful your first time, but there's always time to keep the conversation going. Remember to just keep going because, trust me, it will be absolutely worth the effort you put into it. These are things I've learned. Thanks for listening.